Sílvia faced her toxic mother-in-law and saved her family from chaos that no one imagined existed. Sometimes life seems to follow a script we didn't write. When I married Gustavo, after years of trying to rebuild what was left of me, I truly believed I had found the rest I'd been searching for. I'd already faced grief, loneliness, and the fear of raising a child alone. So when love arrived again, I thought fate was finally being kind to me. Our home was simple, but peaceful. Matthias, my 11-year-old son, laughed more than ever. And when Heiter was born, it felt like the entire universe fit in my lap. What I didn't know was that, along with the joy, came a silent shadow. Alice, my mother-in-law, a woman who seemed incapable of seeing her son happy without feeling threatened. I remember the first look she gave me at the family lunch that marked the beginning of my marriage. There was nothing explicit, just a restrained smile, a touch of disdain, like someone assessing an intruder. That day, she commented on how much Bianca, Gustavo's ex-wife, was a family woman, someone who understood the role of a wife. I laughed awkwardly, trying to dismiss it, but inside something was already breaking. I wanted to believe it was just fleeting jealousy, a natural resistance to the new. But time would show that what Alice felt for me was far from simple. It was possession, disguised as concern, and I would be tested in ways I never imagined I would face within my own home. Before I continue, I need to introduce myself. My name is Sílvia, I'm 35 years old, and I'm writing this story years after surviving something that, for so long, shattered my peace. At the time, I was a teacher, a mother, a newlywed, and someone trying to start over after widowhood. I lost Renato, my first husband, in an accident that left me shattered. It took years for me to breathe without feeling guilty for being alive. When I met Gustavo, I believed love could heal what time couldn't. He was sweet, attentive, and with Matthias, he was everything I dreamed a stepfather would be. Believing this made me let my guard down, and perhaps that was my mistake. I didn't see the danger coming because I was busy being happy. The first few months were calm. Alice would come over occasionally, bringing cakes and gifts for the baby, and spoke as if she wanted to help. I thanked her, accepted her, and tried hard to please her. But her tone changed with small details. You should make the porridge the way Bianca did. Or, Gustavo always liked the house tidy that way. Each sentence was a fine, invisible needle, but one that left me bleeding inside. Gustavo, trying to avoid conflict, asked for patience. She'll get used to it, he said. I wanted to believe her, but what Alice did wasn't about adaptation. It was about domination. She couldn't accept that her son had started over without her command. And little by little, she began to invade the space that was mine. Everything got worse when she started coming into our house unannounced. One day I came home from school to find Alice reorganizing Heitor's room. The baby's clothes were folded differently. The mobile had been moved. This room was a mess, honey. I made sure to clean it up, she said, in the same sweet, venomous tone I was already familiar with. It made my blood boil, but I swallowed it. Gustavo urged me to calm down, saying she only wanted to help. But deep inside, something inside me began to crack. The feeling of invasion was constant. I would wake up tense, checking the clock, dreading the doorbell, and when she arrived, my entire body stiffened. I no longer felt like I owned my home or my life. The final straw came one Sunday. We were gathered for lunch, and, as always, Alice made a point of commenting on Bianca. She said she'd run into her former daughter-in-law at the market, and that she was even more beautiful and focused. She spoke as if gently planting thorns, and I felt my chest tighten. When I tried to change the subject, she laughed and said, "It's not jealousy, is it, Sílvia? You know Gustavo has always had refined taste." The table fell silent. Matthias, who had been eating quietly, looked up and stared at me, and that broke me. For the first time, my son was witnessing the venom disguised as kindness. I felt my face burn. Gustavo, uncomfortable, asked her to stop, but Alice just shrugged and added, "I'm only telling the truth, my son." I left the table and cried, locked in the bathroom. After that day, something in me began to change. The pain gave way to a mixture of anger and helplessness. I tried to protect Matthias and the baby, but it was like swimming against an invisible current. Gustavo, caught between his love for me and his fear of confronting his mother, began to lose his way. Sometimes he defended me firmly. Other times, he fell silent, and the silence hurt more than Alice's words. I began to feel ashamed of being sad, ashamed of not being able to cope. I slept poorly, woke exhausted, and any noise put me on alert. The house, which had once been a shelter, became a place of tension, and I, who had always been rational, began to feel like I was losing control of my own mind. It was during this period that Matthias, my sensitive and observant boy, began asking me questions I couldn't answer. "Mom, why doesn't Heitor's grandma like us?" I tried to hide it, but he could tell. He began to become more withdrawn, more irritable. One day, he cried, saying he no longer wanted to stay home when Alice came over. That hit me like a blow. I realized the problem wasn't just mine anymore. It was my son's too. I was allowing her presence to contaminate everything we were trying to build. And for the first time, I felt afraid I was repeating the same dynamic I experienced in my first marriage. The silence that destroys you from within, little by little, until only emptiness remains. I thought about giving up. Yes, I did. I even considered separating from Gustavo. Not for lack of love, but out of exhaustion. I loved that man, but I no longer knew if he was capable of protecting me from my own mother. I remember one night when he came home late, and I, sitting on the couch, poured everything out. I said I couldn't take it anymore, that I felt invaded, diminished, humiliated. He listened to me silently and cried. It was the first time I'd seen him cry. He said he was trying to balance everything, but no longer knew how. And in that moment, I understood that we weren't enemies. We were both trapped in the same web of manipulation that Alice had been weaving for years. In the following days, we decided to distance ourselves from her. Gustavo stopped answering daily calls, limited visits, and began setting boundaries. At first, it was a relief, but Alice didn't accept it. She began showing up unexpectedly, leaving aggressive messages, crying, saying we were destroying the family. And the pressure intensified when she started looking for Bianca again. She called her, bad-mouthed me, and tried to bring her closer to Gustavo. I heard about this from a mutual friend and trembled with rage. It was as if Alice was trying to erase me from existence. And for the first time, I felt the urge to stand up to her. Not for myself, but for my children. The day I decided to confront her began like any other. I was tired, with dark circles under my eyes, and my body heavy from swallowing so much anger. Alice appeared, unannounced, wearing that same sweet perfume that always made me nauseous. She entered as if she owned the house, looked around and said, "Everything's a mess, Sílvia. Bianca never left things like this." I took a deep breath, tried to contain myself, but this time something inside me snapped. I asked her to leave. She laughed mockingly and replied, "Who do you think you are to send me away from my son's house?" At that moment, my body trembled, but my voice was firm. "I'm the woman who lives here, and from today on, whoever enters or leaves this house is up to me." The silence that fell was deafening. She looked at me with contempt and left without saying anything. I was trembling, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was breathing fresh air. Gustavo came home from work, and I told him everything. He was shocked, but he didn't scold me. On the contrary, he hugged me and told me it was time. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same side, and that gave me strength. Still, the battle was far from over. Alice called, texted, and made a fuss. She said I was stealing her son, that I was a cold and manipulative woman. She tried to shift the blame onto me, and for a few days I even doubted myself again. But Gustavo was firm. He changed the lock, blocked her number, and together, we decided to seek therapy. It was then that I realized how much I had neglected to exist out of fear of rejection. In the sessions, I began to understand that Alice wasn't just a difficult mother-in-law. She was the reflection of a woman who had never dealt with her own wounds. Her husband, Carlos, had cheated on her and humiliated her for years, and the pain she'd never faced had turned into control. I was just the latest target of her frustration. Understanding this didn't justify what she did, but it helped me see what was behind her anger. I also began to realize how I had become a hostage to the desire to please. I wanted to be accepted, recognized, validated. And in this quest, I'd lost respect for myself. It was hard to admit, but it was liberating. Over time, the distance began to work. Alice kept trying to infiltrate, but she no longer found space. Gustavo and I began to rebuild what she had nearly destroyed. Matthias began to smile again, and the atmosphere at home became lighter once more. There were still difficult days, moments when the fear of a new confrontation paralyzed me. But the difference was that now I knew who I was, and I no longer needed to justify myself. I learned to say no without guilt, to protect my space, and most importantly, to understand that love without limits becomes a prison. It was in this process that I began to rediscover myself as a woman, not just as a wife and mother. One of the most memorable moments happened months later, when I ran into Alice at a family party. She looked at me from afar, and for the first time, I didn't look away. She tried to get closer, but her tone was different, tired, dejected. She spoke little, almost without venom. I listened to her calmly, but without bowing. I left with one certainty: the peace I sought would never come from her acceptance, but from the respect I learned to have for myself. And it was like that, amidst wounds and lessons learned, that I began to understand the true meaning of overcoming. The rebuilding process wasn't quick, nor linear. There were days when I'd back off, afraid of giving in to the anxiety Alice provoked, and questioned whether I was being firm enough. But every little step forward counted. I began to prioritize my needs, organize my routine without guilt, and make decisions with confidence. Matthias noticed the change and began to open up more, talking about feelings he'd previously kept bottled up. He told me he felt safer, more protected, and I understood that every step I took wasn't just for my own peace, but for my son's emotional security. This sense of responsibility gave me the strength to keep going, even when I missed Renato so much, and even when my fear of Alice resurfaced. Gustavo became my true partner in this process, not just as a husband, but as an ally. We started talking about everything, setting boundaries, and deciding together what would be acceptable in our lives and in our home. I realized that while I was afraid to confront Alice, he also suffered from his mother's constant pressure. The difference is that, together, we began to transform the tension into action. We established clear rules, scheduled visits, respecting schedules, no comparisons or criticism. Each small victory reinforced my confidence in myself, and also the confidence Gustavo had in our marriage. We began to feel like we were, finally, a team. Over time, Matthias's perception of boundaries and respect changed radically. He began to speak up when something bothered him, and even to protect his younger brother, Heitor, when he noticed signs of manipulation or intrusion. It was incredible to realize that my example was teaching him not only how to deal with his mother-in-law, but with life in general. I learned that being firm, fair, and patient is a delicate but essential balance. Matthias looked at me with admiration, and I felt I was building not only my own peace, but also the foundation for him to become an emotionally healthy man. The emotional freedom I gained allowed me to see Alice from a different perspective. I still felt anger and hurt, but I was able to separate my emotions from her behavior. I understood that I couldn't control what she did, but I could control how I reacted. I learned not to internalize her criticism, not to allow her venom to affect my self-esteem. Every ignored call, every rejected visit, became an act of self-love. I discovered that boundaries aren't walls, but shields that protect what's most important: my family, my home, my well-being. The transformation didn't stop with me. Gustavo and I began spending more quality time together, rediscovering the complicity and love that had united us. Our communication improved, and with it, our mutual trust. Heitor grew up in a more relaxed environment, with clear rules and a constant presence of love. Matthias became more confident, able to express his feelings without fear. And I finally felt that the peace I'd been searching for wasn't outside the home, but within me. I had survived, grown stronger, and protected those I loved most. Alice's shadow still existed, but it no longer controlled the light we created within our home. Looking back today, I see how each hardship taught me something essential about myself and what it means to protect those you love. Alice, with all her control and venom, ended up being a catalyst for my transformation. For years, I believed I needed to be accepted by everyone, please everyone, and avoid conflict at all costs. But life showed me that this behavior only weakened me. I learned that respect and boundaries are non-negotiable, that love doesn't mean self-denial, and that creating a healthy home depends on the courage to face those who try to destroy it. This understanding became my foundation, my silent strength. Gustavo and I remain together, but our bond is now much stronger than before. It's not just love, it's partnership, complicity, and mutual respect. Every decision we make is based on dialogue and clarity, not fear or manipulation. We've managed to transform our home into a safe space where Matthias and Heitor can grow with self-esteem and confidence. Seeing my son smile, listening to his opinions, and realizing that he feels protected is one of the greatest rewards I've ever received. Learning to fight for my family's well-being was a painful but incredibly transformative process. Reflecting on this experience, I realized that my overcoming wasn't a single moment of courage, but a series of small daily actions. Each time I firmly said no, each time I respected my feelings instead of swallowing my pain, each time I protected my family from outside interference, I grew stronger. And this strengthening didn't come instantly. It came from ongoing work on self-knowledge and assertiveness. I learned to value myself, my choices, and to stand firm in the face of any pressure. There are still times when Alice tries to infiltrate me, but now they don't affect me. I've found my voice, my security, and my peace. I know not all conflicts have perfect solutions, but I've learned that it's possible to live with integrity and love, even in the face of toxic people. My life changed because I decided not to allow anyone to diminish my worth or interfere with my family's happiness. Today, I can look to the future with hope, knowing that, whatever comes, I'm prepared to protect my space, my children, and my marriage. Ultimately, I share this story with anyone who needs to hear that it's possible to overcome seemingly impossible situations. Pain exists, fear exists, and there will be times when giving up seems inevitable. But courage, even a small amount, is enough to change everything. I learned that love is also about fighting, that boundaries are essential, and that respect begins within ourselves. Today, when I look at my home and see Matthias playing with Heitor, Gustavo smiling beside me, and the feeling of peace filling every corner, I feel certain that we can do it. And this certainty, built through tears and challenges, is the greatest victory I could achieve.